I have a wonderful group of about 15 young scientists who are looking for ways to slow and reverse the aging process in human cells, human tissue. So we grow human tissue like little brains in the lab. And then we also test our technologies in mice.
So welcome to the Longevity Code, the podcast of Longevity Center Switzerland, your partner for a healthier and, of course, better life. My name is Erat, and I'm your host today, and I'm extremely delighted to have a very, very special guest, Professor David Sinclair from Harvard Medical School, with us today. Welcome.
Hi, Anna. Thank you for having me on.
It's really, really an honor, particularly since you've been in the field of longevity for so long. At the moment, the field of longevity is exploding. It's such a mega trend, but you've been involved for many, many years. What triggered you initially to become or get involved in the field on healthy aging and longevity?
Well, it started really at the age of 4 when my grandmother told me that everybody I knew and my pet cat would die, and then I would die. And then that was a very sad thought. I think all of us go through that realization around that age that there's mortality and a lot of suffering in our world and in our families, and then in our own lives. And it's a tragic thought. We tend to forget about it. We don't like to think about it. We barely ever even speak about it. But that thought didn't escape me for many years. Most of my life, I think about that every day, about how short life is. I'm not so worried about my own longevity, though I do like to see human progress. But I was disturbed throughout my childhood that nobody was talking about it. Why is nobody talking about this most tragic of human experiences? And why is nobody even doing anything about it? Barely talking about it, only at funerals. And so I went into biology. I was going to be a doctor of medicine, a medical doctor, and at the time was more interested in biology and how things worked. I like pulling things apart, seeing how they work. And so I got a PhD in biochemistry and genetics, and met a professor at MIT in Boston who was starting a project to study aging in yeast cells, the yeast cells that make beer and bread and champagne. And I thought, well, that's a really interesting way to address that problem. And in 1995, I headed over to MIT to start work on this project to understand what might cause aging. And the hope was that yeast cells were going to be the same as humans in some way. And then perhaps one day in either my lifetime or my children's lifetime, we could actually do something about this problem.
Brilliant. And that's, pretty much 30 years ago.
It's been a while, actually. That is true. I can't believe first of all, how quickly time flew, but also unbelievable how much progress we've made since those days. We're not in yeast anymore, of course, where many doctors are treating people for aging now.
Exactly, because as we all know, animal models are not humans and vice versa, but we can learn definitely a lot from these kind of studies. So what is at the moment, what is your involvement at the moment in the field of longevity? Are you more into animal models, or are you also having some human trials?
Well, we do the animals at Harvard Medical School. They're a bit cheaper than studying humans. So my lab runs off grants and donations, and so we cannot do human studies easily. So what we're doing in my lab, I have a wonderful group of about 15 young scientists who are looking for ways to slow and reverse the aging process in human cells, human tissue. So we grow human tissue like little brains in the lab. And then we also test our technologies in mice. And a typical mouse lives about 2.5 years. So the experiments are still long, but not as long as a human longevity study. But to do human studies, we've spun out a couple of big companies more recently that are doing human studies. One has been doing studies in humans for 3 years, and the other one, which does more age reversal rather than age slowing, will, if all goes well, treat the first patient next year.
Brilliant. When I was at Harvard Medical School, we basically only had mice models. So it's great to hear that you also have some human or I believe organoids that you're looking at. And when we want to talk about that, what about mitochondria? This is also something that you're quite famous for, looking into mitochondrial health and this aspect of aging. Can you tell our listeners about mitochondria and the impact of mitochondrial health on aging altogether?
Yeah, well, some people refer to mitochondria as the battery packs of the cell, but they're much more than that. They don't just generate most of our energy, but they also create components that help us build things like protein. And so they're essential. And the problem is, as we get older, we have fewer of them, and they have their own DNA because they were once life forms outside us. We've now subsumed them. We now have them growing inside our own cells as part of us. And their DNA becomes mutated and they become less efficient. And one of the ways I believe, and many others believe, to slow and even reverse aspects of aging is to boost the mitochondrial activity and the number of them in all tissues, especially in muscle and in brain tissue.
And mitochondria we inherit from our mothers, basically. So it's pretty much maternal DNA. How can you what do you believe? How can you increase the number of mitochondria, or can you do that? Is it possible?
Oh, you certainly can. We do it every time we exercise, for example. The body can respond and multiply the mitochondria. It's called mitochondrial biogenesis. But there are other ways of doing it. There are supplements and drugs that can be used to boost up mitochondria as well.
Since we're talking about supplements, I would love to talk about NAD and NMN and these kind of supplements, which have an interaction with mitochondria. Can you tell me more about that? Because I think this is something that you have been very closely looking at with your entire team.
Yes. So we're looking at NAD boosters, these molecules similar to NMN, as medicines to treat diseases of aging. And just I want to mention that though my name and my research is used all over the internet to sell products, I don't sell any human supplements for these, with these molecules in them. But I do research them. I like to talk about them. So this is not a promotion of any sort. I don't want to confuse people. The research and the clinical trials that we're doing do show that raising NAD levels back up to youthful levels, because those levels do decline with age, does seem to have health benefits in people. We definitely see benefits in mice. In my lab, and others, but in my lab, I can speak about increased endurance, improved memory, less frailty. We're going to report, or at least submit a paper on lifespan extension in mice with NMN. But we have to be careful. These haven't been fully tested long term. So under doctor supervision, make sure if you do take supplements, let your doctor know. And so in the human studies, what we're seeing, and it's been published by groups who did the study, I'm merely an observer here. They showed that NMN, or a molecule like NMN, can actually reduce blood pressure, cholesterol, bad cholesterol, and triglycerides. So it's early days, but we're starting to see signs that these are beneficial for health in humans, not just in mice.
And for our listeners, could you explain the difference between NAD and NMN?
Yeah, so NAD is the molecule that is really the fuel for enzymes that control mitochondria and inflammation. The enzymes that we work on that need NAD to work are called sirtuins. And you can think of sirtuins as defenders of the body against aging. NMN is a precursor molecule that the body can turn into NAD very rapidly. And so you can have it injected, or you can swallow it, and it will go into the body, and the body will, in one step, convert that into NAD. And we see, the field sees that when you swallow NMN or other precursors of NAD, that NAD levels will rise quite rapidly within a few hours. The full levels rise maximally after about 10 days. And if you take 1 gram of NMN, for example, you would raise NAD levels by about twofold, which is a good number because it's thought that NAD levels decline by half during your lifetime.
Would you say that NMN is safer than NAD? These scores that we have here, at least in Switzerland, people are a little bit reluctant about taking supplements containing NAD, and they are much more open to the precursor. What is your experience? Can you claim that it's safer to take the precursor rather than the actual active ingredient?
Well, I can only talk about what the science says. I don't want to speculate. And clinical research is much more abundant when it comes to NMN and NR in humans. And I look forward to somebody doing a study where each of those supplements is compared side by side. I don't see any reason why taking NAD should be of any health concern. But again, I think more studies would be needed to be sure.
Absolutely, and also obviously human studies. What about a lot of times in medicine when we talk about water soluble supplements or molecules, we tend to think that they're safer. NADs, well, the supplements are water soluble, right?
Very, yeah. That's one good thing about them. Many of the supplements that you get from plants are hydrophobic, insoluble in water. NMN and NAD are very soluble, which is great. And if you want to get them absorbed into the body, there's no problem.
That's good to know, as opposed to, for instance, vitamin D or K or E or A, which obviously are fat soluble and stay in the body for a long period of time. Whereas a lot of times, water soluble ones are the ones that we can quickly get rid of if we take too high doses. So that's definitely a benefit. What about oxidation? Because oxidative stress is clearly a mechanism of aging. Is NAD, is it an antioxidant or is it just anti-inflammatory, or how would you categorize the molecule?
So NAD is used by many chemical reactions in the body, more than 400, some of which include reactions that mop up free radicals and help repair damage. So while NAD itself isn't an antioxidant, it does turn on mechanisms that can have antioxidant activities. And so that's how they work. And I mentioned the sirtuins. We have 7 of those enzymes. And the one we study mostly is number 1, sirtuin 1, and it controls anti-inflammatory action and antioxidant action.
Which other sirtuins are, in your opinion, important? Is it just number 1, or are there other ones that you find crucial in the process of aging or anti-aging?
Well, in humans, we don't know really a lot. There's some genetic studies are looking at variations in the human population that link SIRT1 and SIRT6 to longevity. SIRT6 especially is correlated with health, and or at least associated with health and longevity. Yosin Su, a professor at Columbia, has done a lot of that work. In mice, we know that SIRT6 extends lifespan in many different experiments and strains of mice done by my former trainee, Chaim Cohen, in Israel. And SIRT1, if you turn it on in the brain of mice, they also live longer. As for the others, they all seem to do good things. SIRT3, 4, and 5 are found in mitochondria and seem to do good things for health there. SIRT2, we showed, helps with fertility, and SIRT7 also helps prevent senescence, which is a problem in aging. So overall, they seem to be, if you want to just generalize, helpful for overall health, but most of it comes from mouse studies. So, of course, more research is needed for these other sirtuins as well.
And you already mentioned before, because I come from the field of sports medicine, and we have various also Formula One drivers and all kinds of athletes that we take care of. And so we, of course, and I particularly believe that exercise is medicine. I think that the musculoskeletal organs are kind of the organs of healthy aging. What can you do in terms of exercise to stimulate mitochondria and mitochondrial health? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, any exercise is good. If somebody's not moving, the best thing they can do for longevity is just to move. And that includes taking, well, hopefully more than 7,000 steps a day. But the way to really boost mitochondria is to become hypoxic, so lose your breath. So the kind of exercise I'm talking about is when you cannot easily carry out a conversation, you're puffing. So you want to either get on a treadmill or go for a run or row, do something that uses up a lot of oxygen, and that will really stimulate your mitochondria. The good news is you don't need a lot of exercise to do that. Just 10 minutes every few days is what I would say is minimum, but even that small amount can be very beneficial.
It's really remarkable. I mean, we tend to think that we need to do a lot of exercise, which a lot of times more is slightly better, depending a little bit on what quantities we're talking about. But also absolutely minimal amounts, just as you say, can have a huge beneficial impact. And unfortunately, today's youth on a global level, 80% of today's youth on a global level does not get the minimum amount of recommended exercise per week that's recommended by the WHO. And this is it's really a ticking time bomb. What are you doing in terms of exercise?
Well, I should do more too. I lift weights mainly, and I run occasionally, usually on my way to catch an airplane.
Are you one of those that's always late to the airport?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time on airplanes last year, mostly because I'm educating. I'm going around the world giving talks and meeting people. So I'm not the best role model for exercise for sure. I would love to do more of that, and because I'm on the road, I find it challenging. But yeah, I used to do a lot more. I used to run a lot. I used to run quarter marathons, half marathons, these kind of things. But mostly lately, I try to keep my muscle mass up because as I'm aging, of course, I'm losing up to 1% per year. So I focus on that. I do go for walks every day when I can, so that's my minimum. But I think that what if I'm honest, that's the biggest downfall in my regime. I do a lot of good eating. I do a lot of supplementation, but exercise, I do need to do more of that.
So I suppose you did not participate in last Saturday's Boston Marathon.
Goodness, no, I was in the lab doing research. I do have a standing desk, so I'm trying to maintain some strength that way. I'm sitting now, but usually through the day, I rarely sit down.
Well, that's exactly what we said before. You really need minimal amounts, and they're very easy kind of tricks, such as a standing desk or even a treadmill that you can walk, or going outside on a micro break, on a green micro break, and take your calls from outside, which is also feasible where you are located at the moment. So absolutely. In terms of your vision for longevity medicine, where would you like to be, and where would you like the field of longevity to be in 10 years' time?
I would love aging to be considered a treatable medical condition by the authorities that regulate medicines throughout the world. And so in my book, Lifespan, I made a strong case for aging to be a disease. And I think that discussion is ongoing. A lot of people now are interested in that idea. So that would be one thing I would love to have happen in 10 years. And on the technology side, here's what I expect. I expect that many of us will have monitoring devices that are much better than what we have right now. They could be stuck to the chest that will be monitored. You'll monitor yourself 1,000 times a second instead of an annual checkup, which I think is medieval. And on the drug and medicine side, I hope that either my developing medicines or someone else will break through and have something available for doctors to safely prescribe for maximizing someone's longevity. Already there are some medicines that seem to show promise, of course, but these were not developed for aging initially. But I think there will be some in 10 years, perhaps many, that doctors can use for treating various diseases of aging and even aging itself.
Brilliant, brilliant. My next guest will actually be Phil Newman. So I will be talking about technology as well, and AI, and also quantum computing. So I'm really curious about his viewpoint. But this has been so enriching. It's been so interesting to talk to you. So Professor Sinclair, thank you so much for this wonderful exchange. And I look forward to many more in the future. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Anna. Thanks for having me on.
So what a thrilling episode together with Professor David Sinclair from Harvard Medical School. And I really hope that you will join me for the next episode as well of the Longevity Code that is produced by the Longevity Center here in Switzerland, your partner of a healthier and better life.